You've probably studied the social effects of the media in other courses, but it may have been a while, and so I just wanted to give you a brief overview of how the media work in terms of affecting issues. And there are a variety of things, some that are easy to understand, some that are kind of complicated. The first one is called hypermnesia, and it's the ability to remember items increases over time and with more exposure, so that the more you're exposed to stories about binge drinking, the more you remember. The more you're exposed to stories about crime, the more you remember. And that may be an accurate or inaccurate perception. Generalization is another one. You learn a set of facts and then apply those facts to other sets of conditions. As I mentioned, the crime story appears about your local community, and you generalize that crime has increased, when in fact crime is generally decreased over the past 20 years. Exposing secrets. Media provides information that you do not know about individuals or information or institutions. Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton, some of the things. Agenda setting goes back a ways, and essentially what it is that editors choose stories and eliminate others, and so therefore they're telling you what you should think about. This is tending to break down a bit now with social media, particularly Twitter, Facebook. What tends to happen here is that sometimes fluff can be emphasized over substance. And, for example, one of the reasons why we do Philadelphia neighborhoods and focus on underserved and underreported neighborhoods in Philadelphia, the capstone class of the Department of Journalism, is that there's a lack of interest in stories about urban neighborhoods. Framing is another thing. It's an emphasis on specific aspects of a story. You may or may not recall, you may have been too young, but there were a whole lot of stories about what was called Y2K, and just before January 1st, 2000, and it emphasized the problem with computers reading 1900 rather than 2000. A lot of people spent a lot of money to update their computers at corporations, and nothing really happened. Even though a bunch of people actually stockpiled supplies because of the chaos that was thought to have been happening. There are attitudinal effects, and these influence your opinion or reinforce your opinion. There are several types, and we'll go through them: the sleeper effect, reinforcement, and internalization. So the sleeper effect is you read or you listen to a story, and sometimes later you recall facts of the story to discuss the matters. So for example, the Monica Lewinsky story and her interview with ABC's Barbara Walters tended to create the subject as a victim. And that was essentially the modus operandi for the Monica Lewinsky story, that she was the victim in all of this, which may or may not be true. Reinforcement. Media provide information that coincides with your beliefs. And, for example, those who support or oppose abortion tend to believe information that support their viewpoint, while they reject information that opposes their viewpoint. Not necessarily a good thing. Internalization. Media messages, usually about major themes influencing society, become an integral part of your own beliefs and your attitudes. That's, relatively clear in terms of the change from support of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan to opposition over the past few years. There are also behavioral effects. The media actually change your behavior, and there are several types: activation, imitation, and disinhibition. So that for activation, a media message makes you act. You send a message to Congress. You boycott a product. You telephone or email your government representatives. Imitation. A media message causes a change in your behavior. The use of slang from a television program, such as, even today, and I don't know how many years Seinfeld has been off, but people still say yada, yada, yada. Disinhibition. You act in a different way from your ordinary behavior. A calm individual joins a discussion group on the internet in which he or she takes a much more aggressive tone. Violence on television causes more aggressive behavior. It's not necessarily true. You can see studies that are, it's kind of 50-50 on what the influence of violence on television is. There's some other theories of effects that you probably studied in your first mass media class. The magic bullet was the first one, that the media caused you to act immediately, and it's been discredited for the most part. The limited effects theory was Paul Lazarsfeld at Columbia, and he found that the media had limited effects on how people voted. George Gerbner developed the cultivation theory, which argued that the media, particularly television, gave people an inaccurate view of the world around them. So what happened is that heavy users of television who watched, let's say, a lot of Law and Order programs thought that the world was much more violent than it actually is or was. And as noted, there differences exist between heavy and light users of television. The spiral of science is kind of an interesting one, is that people with views opposed to the media messages tend to keep those views to themselves. So if you are in a group with a group of liberals and you happen to have conservative views, you tend to stay quiet, or vice versa. If you are a liberal or progressive and in a group with a number of conservatives, as acquaintances, you tend to stay quiet. Accumulation, media have an effect over time. It's clear to say exactly what that effect is, but they do have an effect. Ubiquity. Media exists throughout society, so we can't simply close ourselves off. Whether it's walking down the street and seeing ads, whether it's television, whether it's the internet, it's just all around us. Another one is called consonance, is that media tend to provide a unified picture of an event or a trend. That's generally true of the mainstream or legacy media, is that CNN, CBS, ABC, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Times will tend to give the same view. And this is tending to break down, particularly because of bloggers, because of people who can now have access to the media without going through the legacy media. Another theory is called the third-person effect, and people tend to believe that others, rather than themselves, are influenced by a wide range of media messages. So, for example, I'm not influenced by pornography, but others are. So therefore, restrictions are necessary to prevent those others from being affected by pornography. So rather than a first-person effect that I see how I'm influenced, I say, oh, the problem's not with me, it's with those other people out there, the third persons. There are also what are called uses and gratifications theories. And these are why do we use media? Sometimes they're cognitive. We need to acquire information, knowledge, understanding. Sometimes they're called affective, which is seeking to satisfy emotional, pleasurable, or aesthetic needs. There are also what are called personal integrative needs, strength and credibility, stability, status. I know more than you do because I've read this. There's social integrative needs, strengthening of social contacts with family or friends, talking about the news. And then there's simply tension release, that we're seeking escape and diversion. So we watch something that's funny on TV, or we read a book that's a real potboiler. So that uses and gratifications seem fairly obvious, but as a theory, we use media for certain things. So those are some of the social effects of the media. And so we'll see you online. Thanks very much.